Chosen one, heaven has revealed your primary duty. What if you've been asking, "What is my purpose?" as if it were some complicated mystery, when the actual answer has been simple enough to fit in a single sentence the entire time? What if you've been overcomplicating your entire search, layering it with career questions, financial questions, timeline questions, when heaven's actual answer for your primary duty was never that complicated at all? I want you to set aside every assumption you've built about what purpose is supposed to look like, because tonight's revelation is simpler and heavier than anything you've been searching for. You've spent years, maybe, chasing purpose like it's a treasure hidden behind a complex series of locked doors. The right career, the right platform, the right level of recognition, the right combination of circumstances finally aligning. And every time one door opens, you find yourself standing in front of another one, still searching, still uncertain whether you've actually found the real thing or just another temporary distraction from the actual answer. That exhausting search has probably left you wondering if purpose is even something you're capable of finding at all, or if it's simply reserved for people whose lives look more obviously significant than yours. Have you been searching for purpose as though it were an elaborate treasure hunt, exhausting yourself chasing something that might actually be far simpler than you've assumed? Why your primary duty isn't a carer. Its past is something worth understanding clearly before we go any further. Your primary duty was never meant to be a specific career title, a specific platform, or a specific achievement you can point to as proof you've arrived. It's a posture, a consistent way of showing up in whatever room you happen to be standing in, whatever role you happen to be occupying at any given moment. That posture stays constant, whether you're behind a desk, raising a child, recovering from illness, or standing in front of a crowd. Have you been searching for a specific role or achievement when your primary duty might actually be a consistent way of showing up regardless of the role? Why love has been the answer this entire time, even though it sounds too simple. Here's the actual revelation worth sitting with tonight, even though it will sound almost too simple to be the answer to something you've searched for this hard. Your primary duty is to love well, consistently, in whatever context you find yourself in. Not romantic love specifically, though that counts too, but the broader, harder, more demanding love that shows up as patience with difficult people, generosity toward strangers, honesty even when it costs you something, and genuine care extended toward people who can't offer you anything in return. Does it frustrate you, even slightly, that the answer might be this simple after everything you've put into searching for something more complicated? Why simple doesn't mean easy. Here's something important worth clarifying immediately, because simplicity and ease are not the same thing. The fact that your primary duty can be stated in one simple sentence doesn't mean it's easy to actually live out. Loving well, consistently, especially toward difficult people, especially when you're exhausted, especially when it isn't reciprocated, is genuinely one of the hardest ongoing disciplines a person can practice. Simple statements often carry the heaviest lifetime commitments. Have you been assuming that a simple answer must also be an easy one, when actually the simplicity often disguises exactly how demanding it truly is? If this is landing somewhere real in you, that's exactly why this series exists. Subscribe now, because part 2 goes even deeper into exactly what loving well actually requires of you. Why this duty doesn't depend on your circumstances. Changing fertile. Here's something worth understanding about why this specific duty is actually good news. despite how demanding it is. It doesn't require you to wait for better circumstances before you're able to fulfill it. You don't need a bigger platform, more money, more free time, or fewer responsibilities before you're capable of loving well right now, exactly where you currently stand. This duty is available to you immediately, in your current job, your current relationships, your current imperfect, unremarkable Tuesday. What would it look like to fulfill this duty today, exactly where you currently are, without waiting for your circumstances to improve first? Why you've been undervaluing this duty because it doesn't look impressive. Here's something worth examining honestly, because loving well doesn't typically produce visible, measurable achievement. No trophy, no title, no public recognition most of the time. You've probably undervalued it compared to more externally impressive forms of purpose. But the quiet, consistent choice to love difficult people well, day after day, unnoticed, is actually one of the rarest and most significant things a human being can do. Its lack of visible glamour doesn't diminish its actual weight. Have you undervalued the significance of loving well simply because it doesn't produce the kind of visible achievement our culture typically celebrates? Why this duty repures you to love people who haven't earned? There's the part of this duty that often catches people off guard, and it's worth naming directly. Fulfilling this primary duty specifically requires extending love toward people who haven't earned it, who might never earn it, who might continue disappointing or frustrating you, regardless of how consistently you show up for them. That kind of unearned, unconditional love mirrors something far greater than ordinary human reciprocity, and it's precisely the hardest, most transformative part of this entire calling. Who in your life is currently asking you to love them without having earned it? And how have you been responding to that specific challenge? If this is landing somewhere real, that's exactly why this series exists. Subscribe now, because part 2 continues exploring exactly how to actually live this out practically. Why this duty protects you from the exhaustion of chasing bigger things. Here's something worth recognizing about the genuine relief hidden inside this revelation. Once you accept that your primary duty is this consistent posture of love, rather than some elaborate external achievement, you're released from the exhausting pressure of constantly chasing bigger platforms, bigger recognition, bigger proof that your life matters. You can simply love well, right where you are, and trust that this alone fulfills exactly what you were placed here to do. How much lighter would you feel, releasing the pressure to chase bigger achievements and simply committing to loving well right where you currently stand? Truth for tonight: your primary duty was never hidden behind elaborate circumstances you had to earn or achieve first. It's been available to you this entire time, in every room you've ever walked into, every relationship you've ever navigated, every ordinary day you've ever lived through. Love well, consistently, especially toward people who haven't earned it. That's the revelation. Simple to state, demanding to actually live, and available to you starting right now, exactly where you are. If you've fully committed to this primary duty, starting tomorrow morning, right where you currently stand, what do you think would actually change in your life? You've spent so long searching for purpose in complicated places, assuming the answer had to be as elaborate as your search felt. But heaven's revelation tonight is simpler than that, and heavier than that all at once. Love well, consistently, especially the people who haven't earned it. This is only part 1. Part 2 goes deeper into exactly what loving well actually requires practically, day by day, person by person. If this message reached something real in you tonight, don't let it end here. Subscribe now, because part 2 continues exactly where this left off. The answer was never complicated. Now go live it. In part 1, we talked about why your primary duty was never a career or an achievement, but a posture, loving well, consistently, especially toward people who haven't earned it. So today, let's go further. What does that actually look like, practically, in the ordinary moments of your actual life? Because knowing the principle is one thing. Living it out, in the specific, unglamorous details of your daily existence, is where this duty either becomes real or stays theoretical. Are you ready to get practical tonight? Here's what tends to happen even after someone accepts this principle in theory. They nod along, feel genuinely moved by the idea, and then walk right back into their actual life, without any real shift in how they treat the difficult coworker, the frustrating family member, the stranger who cuts them off in traffic. The gap between understanding a truth and actually living it out in specific ordinary moments is where most people quietly lose the entire point of what they just learned. Have you understood a meaningful truth before, only to watch yourself fall right back into old patterns the moment ordinary life resumed? Why loving well starts with the person who annoys you most. Here's something practical worth naming directly. Your primary duty isn't primarily tested in dramatic, obvious moments. It's tested in the small, repeated irritation of the person who annoys you most consistently. A specific coworker, a specific family member, a specific person whose patterns genuinely wear on your patience. If you're only committed to loving people who are easy to love, you haven't actually engaged with this duty at all. The real test begins with exactly the person you'd rather avoid. Who is the specific person who annoys or frustrates you most consistently? And how are you currently treating them? Why patience is often the most tangible form of love you can offer. Here's something worth understanding about how love actually shows up practically, day to day. For most ordinary interactions, love doesn't look like grand gestures or dramatic sacrifice. It looks like patience, genuinely waiting, without visible irritation, while someone struggles to explain themselves clearly, genuinely listening without planning your response, while someone shares something you've already heard before. That patience, repeated consistently, is one of the most tangible, practical expressions of this entire duty. Where in your daily life could you practice more genuine patience right now as a direct expression of this primary duty? Why loving well sometimes means saying no instead of always saying yes. Here's something important worth clarifying, because loving well is often confused with constant agreeableness. Sometimes genuinely loving someone requires telling them a hard truth, setting a firm boundary, or declining a request that would actually enable something unhealthy in their life. Love isn't the same thing as endless accommodation. Real love sometimes looks like the harder, less comfortable choice to say no, precisely because saying yes would ultimately harm the person you're trying to love well. Have you confused constant agreeableness with genuine love, when sometimes real love actually requires a harder, less comfortable no? If this is landing somewhere real, that's exactly why this series exists. Subscribe now, because part 3 goes even deeper into exactly how to sustain this duty over the long term. Why this duty includes loving yourself. Well, to hear something worth including specifically, because this primary duty is often misunderstood as purely outward-focused. Loving well also includes how you treat yourself, extending the same patience, honesty, and genuine care toward your own life that you're being asked to extend toward others. Neglecting your own well-being while pouring endlessly into everyone else isn't actually fulfilling this duty more completely. It's simply an imbalanced version of it, one that eventually leaves you too depleted to sustain genuine love toward anyone at all. How well have you been extending this same duty of genuine care toward your own life, rather than only focusing it outward? Why this duty often costs something real, and why? That's the point. Here's something worth understanding honestly, about why this duty is genuinely significant rather than simply pleasant. Loving well, consistently, especially toward difficult people, will cost you something real. Time, energy, emotional resources, sometimes even relationships that can't survive your new commitment to honesty and healthy boundaries. That cost isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's actually evidence you're engaging with this duty seriously enough for it to genuinely matter, rather than treating it as a comfortable, costless platitude. What has loving well already cost you, or what might it cost you moving forward if you take this duty seriously? Why this duty repures you to forgive repeatedly, not just onto here's something worth preparing for honestly. This duty rarely allows for a single, one-time act of forgiveness that resolves everything permanently. It typically requires repeated forgiveness, extended again and again toward people whose patterns don't change quickly, if they change at all. That repeated forgiveness isn't weakness or naivety. It's the genuine, difficult discipline this duty actually requires, practiced not because the other person deserves it, but because your own commitment to loving well doesn't depend on their behavior improving first. Is there someone in your life you're being asked to forgive again, not for the first time, but as an ongoing practice rather than a single event? If this is landing somewhere real, that's exactly why this series exists. Subscribe now, because Part 3 continues exploring exactly how to sustain this without burning out completely. Why this duty becomes easier to recognize the more you actually practice. There's something encouraging, worth understanding about how this duty develops over time. The more consistently you actually practice loving well in small, ordinary moments, the more naturally you begin recognizing opportunities to do so, almost automatically, without requiring the same deliberate, exhausting effort it initially demanded. What starts as a conscious discipline gradually becomes a genuine reflex, woven into how you naturally respond to people, rather than something you have to constantly remind yourself to do. Have you noticed this duty becoming even slightly more natural the more consistently you've practiced it in small, ordinary moments? Truth for today: living well practically means patience with the person who annoys you most, honesty even when a hard no is required, genuine care extended toward your own life alongside everyone else's, and repeated forgiveness practiced consistently rather than treated as a one-time event. This duty costs something real, and that cost is exactly the evidence that you're engaging with it seriously enough for it to actually transform your life. If you practice this duty specifically, deliberately, with the exact person who annoys you most, starting tomorrow, what do you think would actually shift in that relationship? You've learned something today that moves this entire revelation from abstract principle into practical, livable reality. That loving well starts with your most difficult relationships, that it sometimes requires a hard no, that it costs something real, and that it becomes more natural the more consistently you actually practice it. Stay committed. Stay patient with yourself as this becomes more natural over time. There's more ahead. Part 3 goes into how to sustain this duty long-term, without burning out or losing yourself in the process. If this message is helping you move forward, subscribe now, because part 3 continues exactly where this left off. You know what to do now. Go practice it, starting today. The moment this duty is actually counted as complete. What if this duty was never actually meant to be finished the way you finish a task on a checklist? And the exact moment it gets counted as complete has nothing to do with an ending at all. What if heaven isn't waiting for you to stop loving, stop extending mercy, stop being a witness? What if the completion you've been quietly hoping for is measured by something entirely different than you've assumed this entire time? Tonight, we bring this entire 8-part journey to its true final close. Stay with me completely, because what we're about to discover changes how you'll understand every single day for the rest of your life. You've walked through so much across this entire series. You've named the duty, practiced it, sustained it, discovered the mercy hidden beneath it, become a witness through it, carried its harder versions with new understanding, and examined your own motivation honestly. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet question has probably been forming. When does this actually count as done? When can you finally rest, knowing you've fulfilled what was asked of you completely? Have you been quietly wondering, throughout this entire journey, when this duty will finally be counted as complete, allowing you to fully rest? Why completion isn't measured by an ending, but by a pattern? Here's the first part of tonight's revelation, worth understanding clearly before we go further. This duty was never designed to have a finish line, the way a project has a completion date. It's not measured by ending. It's measured by pattern, the consistent, recognizable shape your life takes across years and decades, regardless of whether any single day looked perfect. Completion, in this specific sense, isn't a moment you arrive at once and then move past. It's the accumulated evidence of a life that consistently, faithfully, embodied this duty across its entire span. Can you release the search for a finish line, and instead trust that completion is measured by the accumulated pattern of your entire life? Why every imperfect day still counts toward the complete pattern? Here's something worth understanding with genuine relief. This means every day you've stumbled, every moment you've failed to love well, every instance where old resentment crept back in, despite your best efforts, doesn't disqualify you from eventual completion. A pattern isn't broken by individual imperfect days. It's built by the overall trajectory across your entire life, imperfections included, still bending consistently toward genuine love, mercy, and witness, even when any single day fell short of that ideal. Does it relieve you, understanding that your imperfect days still count toward the overall pattern, rather than disqualifying you entirely? Why this duty is actually counted complete in the same moment you're called home. Here's the second, deeper layer of tonight's revelation, worth sitting with in complete honesty. This duty is genuinely counted as complete in the exact moment your earthly life ends, not one moment before. That's not meant to discourage you or make this feel like an impossibly distant goal. It's meant to free you from the anxious pressure of needing to feel finished right now. Today, in this specific season, you are meant to be actively living this out for as long as you're breathing, not anxiously waiting to cross some earlier finish line that was never actually meant to exist. Does understanding this as a lifelong, ongoing calling rather than an early finish line change the pressure you've been carrying to feel done prematurely? If this is landing somewhere real, that's exactly why this series exists. Subscribe now, because this final revelation is only getting deeper from here. Why the measure of completion is faithfulness. not perfection. Here's something worth understanding clearly about how this completion is actually measured. Since it's not perfection, the specific standard applied to your life isn't flawless execution of love and mercy across every single interaction. It's faithfulness, the consistent, repeated choice to keep returning to this duty, even after failure, even after exhaustion, even after seasons where you drifted away from it entirely and had to find your way back. Faithfulness includes recovery from failure as an essential part of its definition, not as evidence that faithfulness never actually existed. Can you measure your own life by faithfulness, including your recovery from failure, rather than by an impossible standard of flawless perfection? Why this entire journey was preparing you for an ordinary Tuesday, not a dramatic finale. Here's something worth understanding as this journey reaches its true conclusion. Everything across these 8 parts wasn't preparing you for some dramatic, cinematic moment where this duty finally gets triumphantly completed in front of witnesses. It was preparing you for tomorrow, an ordinary Tuesday, filled with small, unremarkable opportunities to love a difficult coworker well, extend patience to a tired family member, forgive quietly something you'll never even mention out loud. That ordinary Tuesday, repeated across thousands of similar days, is exactly what this entire journey was always building you toward. How does understanding tomorrow's ordinary Tuesday as the actual arena of this duty change how you'll approach waking up tomorrow morning? Why this compulsion includes everyone your life ever touched, not just your own journey. Here's something worth holding with genuine weight as this journey closes. The completion of this duty isn't measured in isolation, purely by your own private growth and transformation. It includes the ripple effect across everyone your life ever touched. The people you loved well, the people you extended mercy toward, the people who witnessed your consistent faithfulness and were quietly changed by it, whether you ever fully knew their names or understood the full extent of your own impact. Your completion is woven into their stories too, permanently, in ways you may never fully trace during your own lifetime. Does it change the weight of this entire journey? Understanding that its completion includes everyone your life ever touched, not just your own private transformation. If this is landing somewhere real, that's exactly why this series was written. Subscribe now, because there's more waiting for whenever your next chapter needs this kind of depth. Why this moment of understanding is itself part of your own compulsion. Here's something beautiful worth recognizing right now. In this exact moment, everything you've walked through across this entire 8-part series, the naming, the practicing, the sustaining, the mercy, the witness, the harder version, the honest self-examination, and now, finally, this understanding of what completion actually means, is itself already part of your own ongoing pattern of faithfulness. You haven't simply learned about this duty from a distance. You've actively engaged with it, honestly, across an entire journey. And that engagement is already counted, already woven into the pattern that defines your life. Can you recognize that this entire journey of engagement, honest and imperfect as it's been, is already counted as genuine faithfulness in your own life's pattern? The final truth completion was never a finish line waiting somewhere ahead of you, something you needed to anxiously chase or fear falling short of. It's the faithful pattern of an entire life, imperfections included, consistently returning to love, mercy, and witness across ordinary days that eventually become decades. That completion happens gradually, cumulatively, woven into everyone your life ever touched, finally counted whole, in the exact moment you're called home, having lived it out as faithfully as any imperfect, genuinely human life ever could. If you released the anxious search for an early finish line and simply committed to faithful, ordinary Tuesdays for the rest of your life, what do you believe your completed pattern would actually become? Sirius Finalev walked through this entire 8-part journey. From discovering your primary duty was simply to love well, through practicing it, sustaining it, extending it as mercy, living it out as witness, carrying its harder versions with trust, examining your motivation honestly, and finally, understanding that completion is a lifelong faithful pattern rather than a finish line you rush toward. Heaven was never waiting for perfection. It was waiting patiently for a faithful life, and now you understand exactly what that means. If this entire series meant something real to you, don't let it end here. Subscribe now, because there's always another message waiting for exactly the moment you need it most. And this channel isn't finished walking with you yet. Love well. Forgive freely. Live it faithfully, one ordinary day at a time. That was always your complete duty. Now go live the rest of it.